I'm going to start by asking you, can you remember when you first picked up a camera?
Yeah, quite clearly I can remember. I think I was probably like 12 or 13, maybe younger, maybe more like 9 or 10. And I was with my family, and I didn't have a camera, and I was always borrowing my brother's camera. And I just very naturally just took it off and wandered off with it and started photographing fields and trees and things that were around me.
And what stage did you start thinking more seriously?
Seriously. There was a technicality of the camera that scared me, because I'm not technically motivated, I'm not interested in technical, the way things work, I'm not concerned. But I'm very concerned in what's in front of me. And I thought that actually I was going to be a stylist. I thought that was because I love clothes, and not necessarily just styling clothes, but it could have been styling a whole set. And I think to this day it's the set design of my work that interests me the most. But it was the technicality of a camera, the apertures and the f-stops, that scared me away from believing that I could become a photographer. And then I went to college and to study media, and one of photography was very much part of it. And I had a great teacher that taught us that a camera is not a technical thing, it's literally a box you put in between yourself and what you want to capture, and it's a very, very easy box to understand.
When I was a postgraduate, I used to research in the Vogue archive, and I remember you working in there. And what were you doing?
I was, before I went to college to study photography, I worked in the archive at Vogue House. And underneath Vogue in London there's a dungeon of every single Vogue that's ever been published in the world since its beginning. Plus every single photograph and transparency from every British Vogue, kept in great big boxes. And I was doing work experience there, and I was doing things like, at that time in the early 90s, a lot of Cecil Beaton negatives were rammed into a filing cabinet in brown envelopes that were falling to pieces, and I had to go through them and categorise them and preserve them and archive them. And I think that was the bookshelf to understanding the history of fashion photography. And I could look at those photographers, every photographer, and see John Deacon's amazing portraits, and see the contact sheets and see the mistake in it. Not the polished, finished thing, it was the mistake and the beauty of looking at that photographer trying to find that moment. You could practically see the way he'd move the camera back and forth and try and find something with his lighting or his... all those photographers, and I think that was an unbelievable education for me as a photographer.
Lots of photographers use historical fashion photography to help shape their ideas for a shoot or build an atmosphere or whatever. But it's actually rare to find one that's got that kind of archival experience, has actually laid hands on images, not just through books. And I wonder whether it encouraged you to approach photography with a specific premeditated idea of an image in mind, instead of just shipping up and creating on the spot.
I think so, although I have tremendous admiration for photographers that turn up on the day and instinctively act on what's in front of them and create. I mean, I think that's an amazing ability, and it's a very courageous ability. But for me, I think I was so... the way I work, I have to have a mood in my head. I have to have a feeling for something, almost like a direction. It's like a map of how to get through the day. What is the mood? What? There's a sense of something. It's like a smell that you kind of get when you know it's, and then you get all the ingredients together, and it might be a reference from a picture. I mean, actually, I can show you right here in front of me. There's some stuff. This is a shoot I did for Italian Vogue last summer, and I don't know whether you can see this, but it was all, I'd been to see an exhibition at the Tate by the painter Millet. He's a Pre-Raphaelite painter, and then I found this painting. It's of three very, very, very Pre-Raphaelite redheads, and I thought, they're all redheaded. Wouldn't it be great to get three girls that are all redheaded? And then I started to think about, they're these three girls I really was interested in photographing. And then we went up to my favourite location in Northumberland. And actually, talking about things, where things come from, there was one painting that I've forgotten to show you. This painting here is a Millet painting. That painting was the link for me. So I took all these elements. By now I had a cast of three people, and then I had all this mood in my head of all these exquisite Pre-Raphaelite paintings. And we went up to Northumberland with the set designer Shona Heath and the stylist Jacob, and all knowing what we were doing. We all had the same sense in our heads of what we were trying to create, and then put all the elements together, and we just played with them and played with our cast, the two girls and the boy, and tried to exist in this mood that we were inspired by, and that's what created the photographs. And I don't know whether you can see some of my favourite pictures recently.
You painted me two pictures of shoots. You described your early training as one born out of tension and dread. And then you've used, to describe the atmosphere on your own shoots, you've used the word play and it's sort of instruct and a sort of generally more collaborative idea of teamwork. Would that be fair?
Totally. It's like it goes back to it's the set designers. There are three set designers I work with that are unbelievably talented. Simon Costin and Andy Hillman and Shona Heath, and they're I could not work without them. When we do these big sets, not everything I do is about a big set, but I suppose it's become a bit of a thing for me. But to create these fantasy environments that don't exist, I can't create them without those set designers.
I read a quote where you said there was a fine line between the beautiful strangeness that you're trying to achieve in your pictures and ham acting from the model.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you achieve that performance?
I find that's such a line that I'm always walking on, and I look at. It's such a hard line to walk on. You're playing with motifs that are so perilously close to being bad, and you're walking on that edge and trying to bring them back to being beautiful and real. Any set designer will tell you, that everything's held together with gaffer tape and staple guns and glue guns, and it's all wobbling, and it all, from one angle you walk 2 inches that way and it looks like a shoddy mess, and then you walk 1 inch that way and it looks beautiful because the sun hits it and the smoke machine comes out, and it's I think the type of photographs I take are so in danger of being kitsch and gimmicky and hammy, for want of a better, I can't think of another way to describe it, but that's something I'm so aware of and scared of, and always reeling it back in to try and create it's a dangerous beauty, it's a dangerous edge to walk on when you're dealing with the type of sets we're dealing with.
Who are the models that do it best?
There are many models I've worked with that are brilliant. They're silent movie actresses. They're the ones that do it best. The ones that... I remember speaking to Karen Elson about it, and she was saying that when she's photographed, she can feel the moment when the picture is happening, and she can't quite put her finger on what it was about the way she posed, but she knows when it's right. And once that moment goes, you can do as many rolls of film, but you'll never get to that moment where everything was right. And I think any model that has that sense of performance on the stage and a sense of play and open-mindedness and charm. Going back to Alice Gibb, the girl I was talking, she was so unaware of herself, and she I mean, she's been photographed a lot now, but she hadn't really been photographed a lot. And just her natural way of being, in this photograph you'll see, here, this picture here, you can just see this is her, and she's swamped by a John Galliano huge dress coat, and yet something about the way she lifted her hands and the lightness and the way she tilted her head, it's genuinely her. I didn't pose her like that, and there's something charming and young, and she's being her age, and real about that. And in a way that's sort of, it's back to this silent acting, I think. It's the silent actresses, they're the ones. It's not about posing and not being true. It's about silent acting.
If you think back to when you started photography and what motivates you to keep on doing it now, are they the same things?
Yeah, I think so, totally. It's always been the same thing. I mean, I think there's this thing I remember, I always tell students when I teach them that only photograph what you love, and always be true to that. I mean, I think that, you know, when I'm working commercially, that blurs quite in a big way, but that's fine because that's how I earn my living. But when I'm working naturally and honestly, editorially for Vogue, I only photograph what I love. I will only take on a commission. I will only do something that I feel absolutely in love with, whether it's the person or the subject matter or the idea. And that's always been the way for me. Just follow that, and I think you'll always be led in that way. You always know where you're going because you're in love with the enormous crocodile, or you're in love with the aeroplane that flies through the house. You're in love with the way Karen looks, or the way Hannelore, whoever you're photographing, you're in love with that, and that's the direction, and you never get lost.
What are you getting out of it personally?
I think that why I do it is there's no better feeling in the world for me than getting a good photograph. When everything comes together and you look through the viewfinder and there's a window to something magical. You haven't seen it before, you've seen it slightly before in another way, but you see something you haven't yet caught. It is such a thrill, and I don't know, it's something always will lead me, I think, and always will keep me going on as a photographer. It's that excitement of getting together the elements that you think might make something magical, and it often doesn't happen that way. I mean, it's very rare that does happen. And then one day it does so happen that you look through and it's something exquisite.
It can't have escaped you that one day an aspiring photographer is going to sit in the Vogue archive, or indeed look through your book, and look at your pictures just like you did, Cecil Beaton, as a kind of a departure point for their own career. If they do, what is it that you hope that they take away from your pictures?
I think if anything I ever did inspired anyone, I find that so touching, and I think that's what touched me at the beginning. I mean, I think that the point of photography is to touch people. That's the reason for photography, and that's why we love it, is because we are touched. So thinking back to all those photographers whose work I looked at in the Vogue archive, and how it touched me, if I was ever touching a young photographer, that goes back to that universal thing. I think we're all here to work together to perpetuate that human idea of beauty, and if I could ever be part in sparking someone's imagination to create something in the future that's beautiful, that's fantastic.